think originally when I went into the big wide world, leaving school and education, my health history is something that I didn't want to define me.
That is the difference between being where you are and where you want to be. It's just taking that action.
You know, throwing myself in the deep end again and learning as we go. I realised that for a letting agency to make any real sense, it's a scales number. As much as I'm enjoying the process, it's just probably to say chill out a bit, but then it might not have happened. So
you've done it in an ethical way, which is how I see a lot of people doing it these days. But there is that ethos that it doesn't exist anymore, but it certainly does. And here's the example.
26-year-old at the time, walking in where people have got more industry experience than I've been born.
The receptionist was like, "How can we help?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Welcome to episode 5 of the Property Developer Show, the podcast. Today, I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Alistair Trippett from Heywoods in Stoke-on-Trent, an estate agency who cover both lettings and estate agency sales. I think that's how you refer to it, isn't it?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And he's also a landlord as well for his sins. And welcome to the show today, Ali.
Thank you very much, Scott. Thank you for having me here.
No problem. So, I mean, I know your story inside out, obviously the amount of conversations that we've had, but for those at home that don't know who you are, who is Ali?
How far back do you want me to go?
Let's get, do you know what, the full story? Because I think it is relevant to your journey.
I think the more I progress and mature, the more relevancy I see in the earlier days as well. Alistair Trippett from Stoke-on-Trent originally. That's where I've always lived. Obviously Stoke-on-Trent's quite a big area, so different areas within there. But I suppose taking it back to the early days as to how I am here sat in this chair today and my business journey up until then, I've grown up in a very business orientated family and as you've touched on, gone through a journey through property development, some personal and health challenges, and then now, as you say, running an estate and letting agency that's pretty well established and has a good market share in the area.
Nice. So in terms of those health, because do you know what? I do think that is a massive part to your story. And I think that, we've had this conversation. I think that is a part of you and why you've achieved what you've achieved at the age you've achieved in the way that you've achieved it. So I think if we start with that story and then move on to the more exciting stuff, the business stuff and the property stuff.
Yeah, I think, like you say, it is an important one. And as I say, the more mature I get, the more I am in touch with that, because I think originally when I went into the big wide world, leaving school and education, my health history is something that I didn't want to define me. So I probably did a big surge to get away from it and think, right, I'll become relevant in a moment. But perhaps the reason that I was known or had certain connections, whatever it might have been, was because of that. So it was kind of trying to push on and make something that was bigger, louder, and more defining than that. So when I was 11, 12 years old, I was diagnosed with bone cancer. So that was quite a big turn your world upside down, shake it. For me, fortunately, being 11, 12, 13 years old at the time, very naive, so just took one day at a time. But obviously for my parents, their world quite literally was brought to a standstill. As I've touched on, they had a very successful business at the time. And I'm sure if they were sat with me now, they'd agree that, it gets to a point where you probably trade it all just to make sure that you've all got your health. Mm-hmm. And that's stayed relevant throughout my journey. And that's kind of what motivates me, that from a really early day and it's a bit weird saying that you go back to the age of 12 because you're obviously not thinking about careers or business at that point in time. And it might be one of those things that when you've then gone and achieved what you've achieved, that you reflect back on it and think, well, that was the turning point. Doesn't feel like a turning point at the time, obviously.
Unless you're Greta Thunberg.
Of course, yes. But growing up in a business family, I suppose I've always been at the table at family meals, going out for an evening meal, wherever it be. Business was always the topic of conversation. I had very successful grandparents with their business endeavours, and then, like I say, my parents as well. So I suppose the turning point on reflection for me was being sat in a hospital bed with that diagnosis. Pretty awful diagnosis as well. Like the survival rates aren't brilliant, and having to go through 6 months of chemotherapy, endless surgeries. You're literally just a rag doll, and you're at the peril of what over those medical professionals are advising at the time. And throughout my career from there afterwards, I probably then had the whole underlying motion of, I need to build something in my life so that if this ever flares up, or I ever need to find myself in a hospital bed ever again, I need the bills to be paid. I need to have achieved something that I'm proud of. And you need to really make the most of your life and take full advantage of the opportunities that are there. And yeah, so that's kind of where I've always, from an early day, wanted to work with people, have a team, have a business, so that it's not reliant on me going out and doing the graft. It's about a full collection, so that if I'm not there, the wheels are still in motion.
I think you've created that. I mean, obviously at the age of 27, 28.
27, yeah.
Yeah. It's, phenomenal to see. And particularly, I think you were just doing your first big HMO when I think we met, and I've kind of seen you go through the seasons of what you're ultimately doing now, and I think it's just been a great inspiration for me, particularly looking at you thinking I need to be doing more than and trying to keep up with Ali. But I think let's delve into that, because obviously you took on your first HMO in Stoke, which was, when would that have been, 2019?
Yeah, I'm not actually very good with my dates. It's probably numbers don't seem to stick in my mind very well.
I think it was 2019.
Yeah,
I think
it's definitely way pre-pandemic and all of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, 2019 feels about, if not earlier.
Possibly. I'm just trying to think when I came over, and I think, it'd be 2018, 2019. I definitely wasn't working at the time, so I'd left my job 2018 November. So yeah, I think it was around that time. And obviously, do you want to delve into the detail of that?
Yeah, so the way I originally got into property, I was in a really fortunate position where, I'd had all this surgery, I'd left school, and my parents kind of said, well, what is it you want to do now? And because my dad's an engineer, I've kind of got that methodical way of me. My mum is the complete opposite, a bit of a yin and yang, as you quite often see with married couples. So that kind of snowballed to, right, let's help you get your first project. So got my first buy-to-let, did the full refurb, learned all the skills on the go, did another one of those, then started going into flips, because I thought, right, well, 18, 19 years old, maybe 20 years old at the time, 500 quid a month after all the bills, and after all that wasn't really setting my world on fire when I was just getting 100 quid a month.
Yeah.
So I wanted to chase the big wins, as is often the case. So did a couple of flips, and then, as you say, that then took me round to HMOs. So that was a property I bought at auction, a huge derelict pub, and did probably about an 8-month renovation on that one. Again, very heavy on the tools. At that point in time, I think I was quite keen to look at going into being a builder, contractor, whatever it might have been, because from my very methodical way of thinking, that seemed like a great way to do things. And so that HMO project was a huge learning curve for me, because it went from doing kind of almost like hobbyist projects where I had a lot of free help because people were helping me at the time, to, no, that's a business now, you're on your own. Up to 12 trades on site at one time. And we converted that into an 8-bedroom, all-en-suite HMO, which after 10 months of renting it, I swiftly sold. So there's a number of reasons why I did that, but it was a really exciting project where I took something from bare bricks all the way through to a final product.
Yeah. And I think everybody kind of goes through that in the early days. They go through that process of, I suppose, trying to level up what they're doing from the buy-to-let to the HMO, and then they quickly figure, actually, this isn't, the grass certainly isn't greener doing this bigger stuff. And I suppose going from that to then your next step, which was the letting agency, is that right? As well as, or was it the flats?
The block of apartments was the next step. So the next progression from that. So the reason I sold that HMO was the parts of that strategy that worried me. And whenever I do an investment, I'm looking 20 years time. And if it creates any aggro at all, I start getting cold feet. I just want it to be as passive as possible. And when that property was brand new, it was. and started to build a great relationship with the tenants. That was great. But I think once after probably, like I say, 6 to 8 months, we started to have the first sets of tenant turnover. I then started to realise a few things. One was that place needs to look brand new at the end of every tenancy. So you've got 8 tenants, average tenancy, let's say 10 to 14 months, whatever it might be. And it needs to look like a hotel every single time. So there's a maintenance element to that, which granted you put it into your numbers. The bit that really unnerved me was, I've got 8 en suites in there and they're getting hammered. A lot of, we had cleaners going in and it was a brand new product, but when it needs to look brand new at the end of every tenancy, they were getting a lot of use. So I kind of started to think, I did my initial, year 1 numbers. So you get all your rent roll, minus your management costs, minus your maintenance costs, minus your finance costs, utilities, whatever it might be. And it looks brilliant. But the bit where I got my cold feet was, but when am I going to have to replace all these bathrooms again? Because that could be another, 8 en suites. If I just sub that out to the standard they're at, we're probably talking at least $5,000 for each one. So, put that into your numbers, then put into having to repaint the thing every 5 years. So that, along with the opportunity with the block of apartments that came up, also something that now has had more news on it, but at the time, single tax council banding was coming in. So there's a few HMOs in the area where they've been converted and suddenly you'd gone from having a band B council tax on the property that was, for example, £1,800 for the year. You got 8 band A's on each HMO room, which really shook those people that unfortunately got hit with it, and it was really unfairly how it was being done. Some people, I think it was probably the planning applications that triggered it. So you could have one property that had planning done 3 years earlier and was getting away with it, competing with someone whose council tax band has now 10x'd or 8x'd from what it was before. And it just created a really uneven market. So the opportunity came up to, again, at auction, because I'm quite impatient, to buy a block of 24 apartments, which I did, and it was a great location. It's probably 2 miles, a mile and a half down from the Royal Stoke Hospital. And yeah, that was another beast of a project that threw myself in the deep end and learned as we went along.
Yeah, no, I certainly kept up to date mostly on social media, and I think you did a news article as well, didn't you? You managed to get in the local news about that as well.
Yeah, which is always a double-edged sword because I've that and a few other things that I'm sure we'll get round to where we've had like local press coverage, and that's probably been one of the big learnings in life is, and it, we all know it all too well now, is that someone sat behind their keyboard. There's some miserable people there that get their kicks from throwing stones at other people. And I don't want to say it's just a regional thing. I'm probably on the cusp of saying it's probably a national issue because, you've probably seen it as well. You look at the States, someone tries something, they fail, and they get a pat on the back for saying, good job for giving it a go. Here, you give a shot, everyone tells you you're going to fail. You start succeeding, and it's like a flock of sheep that then want to support that and be on the bandwagon because they want to be seen as being a part of something that's a success. And then as soon as you fail, everyone's just slandering you again, saying, well, it's never going to work. Meanwhile, they've put no skin in the game. They're just, they've never risked anything in their lives. And yeah, gone off on a tangent there, but that's
good. I think it's relevant. I think it's funny you say that because when I had the Homes Under the Hammer episode, somehow we managed to end up in like the local news from that. I think because the house was amazing and Dion was raving about it and stuff. It's stunning Victorian property, and obviously it alludes that we getting planning permission in the garden, which it's humongous in the middle of Crewe. It's humongous garden. It's just nothing else other than dead land, basically. And initially people were sending me like, oh, do you realise here now? And particularly on Facebook, I just wasn't clicking on it because I clicked on it and it was just people moaning like greedy Southerners. I'm like, well, I'm more local than Yorkshire tea in Yorkshire.
Yeah.
I've born and bred round here, so that was complete nonsense. And then it was like land grabbers who are trying to build in the back gardens, and I always find it quite interesting that these same people are probably saying, oh, there's not enough houses too expensive. And you almost can't win no matter what you do. And I always see it like with, political stuff or this, that and the other. There's always someone moaning because it just doesn't fit their status quo. And you just can't please anyone, particularly in the UK. I think it's probably an international problem that people just hate all the time, and particularly with social media and the world we live in these days, it's just too easy to do it.
Yeah.
But I think you've just got to rise above it, haven't you? And you've just got to block it out and just think these idiots, like you say, have never risked anything. They've got no understanding of what actually goes on behind the scenes. They just see this end result that is never really what it seems anyway. But despite that, you managed to deliver. Have you finished all of it now? Because I know you were gradually converted. Because how many flats were there?
There's 24 apartments, and it was quite a unique development in some sense. And it's something that I do try and share to other people that have got different investment strategies. And so it was actually purchased with 24 tenants in situ. So the first learning I've had from that, for those that are listening, is if you're buying a property from auction with tenants in situ, there can be small prints in there that say that you'll pay the arrears back to the seller. Fortunately on that one, I think the arrears was like $3,000, which compared to the rent roll was 3% roughly. So
yeah,
it wasn't a deal breaker by any means. But yeah, that was one learning on from that. The other beauty of buying with tenants in situ is I don't think I've ever actually had to put my hand in my pocket to renovate that property. It's just been cash flowed from the rent. So granted, the pot from having 4 years worth of ownership's not as big as it could have been, but I've also not really had to. It's just because a lot of it's been refunneled into reinvesting it, getting the rents back up. So the rental pot on that now is probably about 40% higher than it was. Some other benefits I've had from having tenants in situ is not only have I had cash flow, because I did do, you will remember, doing quite a significant external overhaul.
Yeah.
Which presented some challenge, and that's actually plants the seed for why I then went and started up a letting agency. But the beauty of doing the external overhaul was we still had the rent coming in. It was vitally important to maintain a relationship with the tenants because, as you can imagine, 4-story or 5-lift scaffold goes up around this building. They're still living inside, and you've got tradesmen turning up at, I think it was probably 7 a.m. to start banging on the walls. So it didn't actually go that badly when you take all that into account. But I was also able to access some grants and funding because for any qualifying tenants that are in there, if you're doing improvements to help the energy efficiency of that apartment, then there were at the time grants available because of the benefit that the tenant's going to reap as a result of that. But no, what I've been doing for the internals is every time one's become vacant, I've renovated it and uplifted the rent. But I've been quite fair and reasonable with the tenants that have been there. And just let them leave at their own will. Yeah.
And I think you are the modern version of being a landlord. And that, I think, not being tough on the tenants that are in there. I think people would assume that most landlords like evict all the tenants that are paying, peanuts. And there's a lot of landlord bashing that I see these days, particularly on social media. Whereas this is the reality of a modern landlord is, and I'm going to continue to let the tenants that are in there rent for the rate that they're renting, and might increase slightly just to try and bring it up somewhere in line with where it's fair, and I'm going to improve the property. I'm going to make it more energy efficient, which the tenant, is it bills included or not bills included?
No, bills excluded.
So that then improves the tenants' energy bills, brings their costs down. And I think we as landlords always get these, they're just money grabbers, but quite frankly is an example of not where that, you've improved the building. Yes, it's obviously for financial gain, it's for preserving your wealth, it's for creating wealth, but you've done it in an ethical way, which is how I see a lot of people doing it these days. But there is that ethos that it doesn't exist anymore, but it certainly does. And here's the example right here.
Yeah, you're dead right. And I think, the circles that we're in, and if you're in any kind of property public spheres, a lot of landlords are of that ilk. They want to provide a nice home. They just want their, it's a pension pot for a lot of them. It's not to suddenly make them a millionaire. But yeah, I suppose in the same vein as the social media and any media outlet, it's easy to landlord bash, and it's not always the case.
Absolutely. So then going from the block of flats to the letting agency, which you said planted the seed. So we'll expand on that seed.
Yeah. So I remember, when I bought the building, the agent at the time, who now that I'm in the industry, were a really good agency. Sadly, they've been bought up by a corporate who's pretty much cut the head off of it. But that's a different story.
Which is still good for you at the moment.
Yeah, obviously it is.
We'll get
I suppose one man's loss is another man's gain sometimes. Yeah. Sadly, that is the way the world works. But so they were obviously going to be distraught that they were going to lose all these units. They thought, whatever it takes. So I think, let's say the previous owners were paying 8%, should have been 10%. They probably got a reduction to 8%. They were going all the way down to 5%. I was like, what kind of a service are you going to do at 5% managing this block of apartments? And I'm going to do all this work anyway. So, I, as much as it'll present challenges for me, I want to have that rapport with them, because I'm a big believer in, if you're good to people, they'll quite often be good to you. And if they're not going to be good to you, when you need to call in a favour, at least they'll be a bit more amenable to it. So I ended up self-managing the whole block of 24, had to learn what it took from taking on someone else's property and becoming mine. So having to serve the right notices to inform that there was a new landlord in place, and really just became a bit of a tenancy expert on that block, making sure all the compliance was in place. And that really then showcased to me the value of having good communication, building good rapport, meant that, I was able to rip the outside of a building off and put it back on again. And these tenants were, I'm sure some of them weren't best pleased at some times, but I could still walk on the site and I wouldn't get eggs thrown at me. There was a half decent relationship there, or at least an underlying respect of what we were doing and how we were going about it. And that planted the seed to think, I've got this investment going on. I've done prior investments, and I know you've touched on other podcasts where quite often it'll be a combination of people who do investments, and there's also a revenue business on the side of it. And I thought, that'll serve me perfectly. I've already got a half decent portfolio. Why don't we look at doing a letting agency and just see how we go? I'd done a lot of networking at the time, built a lot of good relationships, and had a half decent name in the area for myself. So it was kind of just a natural progression there to think, well, we'll manage these stocks and let's look to manage others for others as well.
And that then beautifully led on to the acquisition of a local estate agency, Heywoods.
Yeah, so that was a big move. So Habitans was the startup. We ran that for, again, around 18 months, but quite early on, throwing myself in the deep end again and learning as we go. I realised that for a letting agency to make any real sense, it's a scales number. You've got to be probably, when you get to a point where you're managing 100 properties, you then need another member of staff, which then means you need another 100 properties, and it becomes quite a vicious cycle, making sure that you've got the right amount of stock to the right amount of units. So quite early on, we were like, right, acquisition makes the most sense to scale that. Was in a really fortunate position, and I suppose that's probably one of the things that I feel that I do best, is building relationships with people locally and building a half decent reputation of just being a decent person trying to do good things. Was that an opportunity came up for a very, very well established estate agent locally, Heywoods Estate Agents, which the name's been in the area for 144 years. So 1881 was when it was established, and that was a huge opportunity where, unfortunately, the business had its issues that were linked to the previous ownership, nothing to do with the business's performance itself. But again, that was an opportunity for me to step in and see what we could do. But again, that was probably similar to the HMO and the block of flats. It was you've seen an opportunity. You've not really got it all worked out, but you've got enough worked out to think, I'm going to go for this, and we'll see where it takes us.
I think that's the entrepreneurial spirit, isn't it? It's seeing the opportunity, and probably what you've alluded to early on, being 11, 12, 13 is you're kind of naive, you're kind of delusional to it. And I've seen in podcasts, I can't. Oh, there we go. Siri just listening into the conversation there. We'll leave that in. They're watching us. Yeah, I was listening to a podcast. I can't remember who it was, and they were saying that basically that was a question. If you could do business again, what would you do? I think, they've been very successful for 34 years in business. And they were like, I just wouldn't do business ever again. And they were like, well, what do you mean? He was like, because what actually goes into business, any sane person, if they really knew the truth, wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much sleepless nights, worrying, stressing. Even today, unfortunately, one of the guests that was meant to be on the podcast has fallen into hospital. One of those things, found out this morning, been firefighting, trying to find other guests, but it's just the nature of the beast. And you don't get that really in a corporate job. It's quite simple often. It's quite, the worries are different. It's often quite calm, but you've got to be either mentally ill, insane, to inflict being in business, or particularly property, which obviously you and I seem to do and enjoy in a weird way.
Yeah, it's it's a journey, and you've got to. You're kidding yourself if you think that as much as education is vitally important, and I always joke and say I've got a master's in YouTube, so like half of the house projects I've done, I've just been like, right, how do you install tiles? I'll YouTube it and then go out and buy the kit and then resent doing it. But that there's so much information and knowledge out there, but ultimately you've got to go on that journey to be able to do it. And I think I remember being really young. I actually did like a stint where I went to work on super yachts, but also in other avenues of business. Even back to early days at school, you'd see someone super experienced and super knowledgeable and think, they've got that sussed out. They're an expert in their field. I can never compete to that. But the reality of it is they've just had more time at mastering that. And I'm sure we've all heard the analogies of, what's 10 years worth of experience? Is it doing the same thing over and over again for 10 years? Or can you learn that within 1 year? And that for me has always been a big ambition, is to just, learn as much as I can. But going back to your original point of, would you have signed up? I think you've got to go on that journey. And I think it's got to be painful at times for you to really understand it. And as long as if I was to go back to my former self, I appreciate I'm only 27 now, but I've been in property for 10 years, best part of 10 years, is to just, as much as I'm enjoying the process, it's just probably to say, chill out a bit, but then it might not have happened. So, you like you say, you have the sleepless nights, you do worry about it, but that is the get up and go that makes stuff happen.
Yeah.
And, you come across people who, we've got a team now of best part of 19 people that work in the business. And you've got to have those blends of, when I see an issue, I look at my personality profile and I instantly want to fix it, or I instantly want to please people. Whereas I've got other people in the business who won't want to instantly fix it. They'll want to go all the way back to bricks, find out what the root cause is, build it up so that it never happens again, which is absolutely the right way to do it when you're trying to operationally make a business a lot better. But for me, I find it painful because I just instantly want to try and fix it. But it's about having those different skill sets, and it's about knowing who brings what to the table and what your skill sets are. And mine, probably similar to yours, is having ideas, knowing when to jump and when not to jump. It's not about, some of those things might sound like they were quite reckless. They could have gone very wrong. But you've got to speculate to accumulate sometimes.
100%. Yeah. When obviously I've been through a big change over the last 18 months now, nearly 13, 14 months. Obviously we're selling Amplo at the time, and last year, often I'd see someone like January and they'd be like, what are you up to? I'd be like, I'm doing this. And then I'll see him in March and be like, oh, I'm doing this. And they'd be like, what were you doing this a minute ago? And working through different ideas, and just alluding to the point with you saying, taking necessary risk and finding ideas and chasing them. I think as an entrepreneur, you've got to chase these different ideas, and that's what I'd imagine you're the same. That's what I love about business, is that it doesn't have to fit in the box, and you can try different things, and you're not restricted by, this is what your degree is at university. You need to get a job in this field. It's the world's like your oyster. And I think as an entrepreneur, you look at things, whether it's doing HMOs, doing a block of flats, buying an estate agent, you don't see any restrictions with doing that. You just go and do it. Yeah, you consider the risks, like, right, where are the exits if worst case scenario? What happens if it doesn't go right? And I mean, I've been pretty close to the edge on a few occasions where I'm like, this could be it. This is this is essentially the end.
Yeah.
But you often flip things around, which I think that then builds that ability to look at things and go, right, well, worst case scenario, I'll just find a solution. I'll find a solution. Like today, guest cancels this morning. Okay, fine. Find a solution. Yeah. Maybe 5 years ago, I'd been like, oh, I've got, it's disaster. The day's over. But that is one example of where I suppose you looking at buying Heywoods, you've probably used that mindset to go, right, what's worst case scenario?
Yeah, definitely. And I think something that I'm coming more in touch with, and I'm starting to stand my ground on, I'm quite a passive person. I don't get irate over things, but something that I'm starting to learn more is there's no right or wrong way of doing things as well. Especially when like I say, there's so much education out there. You can get yourself in a rut thinking, oh, they're doing it that way and I should be doing it that way. And then, oh, they've done it completely the opposite of the way. Or, looking back at some of those projects, some people would have had that detailed down to the T and they would think I'm completely reckless. Other people would have it so detailed, they never would have bloody done it. Mm-hmm. And, that's the reality of it, that I've had people I started property at the same time with them, they've still not bought anything. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you do realize if you just bought a rubbish deal 5, 8, 10 years ago, you'd have been a hell of a lot more progressed than you are now. So there's no right or wrong way of doing things. That doesn't mean we should all just be reckless, but I think the more education and information that's out there, I personally find it difficult at times thinking, oh, should I be doing it that way? Should I be doing it that way? Mm-hmm. Should I be more analytical and better with my finances and more planned out? But then I kind of rein it back in and be like, well, it's the classic jack of all trades, master of none, which I know is a cliche term, and I know it's been on this podcast before. I've actually heard someone say, jack of all trades, master of none, but a master of one is better than something like that. And it actually brings it back to being able to do a little bit of everything is better than being so bottlenecked that you're a perfectionist and you're a control freak, and you're so controlling that you'll never let go. Yeah. And I think it's ultimately it's about knowing what your skill sets are and what you bring to the table.
I always and sort of touching on the point that people started in property at the same time as you and they still haven't bought anything. The amount of like conversations that I've had with people, and I can always tell if they're going to do something or not just by their actions mostly. But the amount of times I've had multiple conversations with people years on and they've still not done anything. And I'm like, well, what are you waiting for? Oh, well, the market's going to do this or the market's going to do that. Yeah, but you don't know that. No, and if you did, you wouldn't be sat here having this conversation with me. Believe me, you'd be on a yacht somewhere. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing in property is people never really take action. And I always think that's kind of where the big training companies, they get those kind of people in that they just know are never going to do anything, but they feel like they're doing something by going on these training courses, but they never actually take that information and implement it. And it's the same with obviously you and YouTube. You actually, yes, you looked on YouTube, but about various stuff, probably not how to buy blocks of flats or how to buy an estate agent.
Probably seen it somewhere on there, yeah.
I'm sure there probably is something. Yeah. If not, we'll make one from this video. But it's just taking that action, and people often they just don't, and they just don't. And of course, not everyone is happy to do that, but that is the difference between being where you are and where you want to be. It's just taking that action.
Yeah, and again, there's no right or wrong. And part of me wants to say I'm wrong in saying this, but there's people that have a strategy that they follow, which is brilliant because you can probably scale that and it's consistent. But if that strategy is ring fencing you so much that you're pushing square pegs into round holes, then that strategy can sound as great as you want, but you've got to have a bit of flexibility and just see what's out there and have a dive. So look at the past I've done buy-to-lets, I've done flips, I've done blocks of flats, and I've kind of, a lot of those are bought with avenues in place, but then kind of had to learn to see which one I feel fits best. It's not been I'm going to do 5 of these exactly to this specification because I can rinse and repeat. And And I'm not saying that's a bad strategy, because people do that and they do it very effectively and they can scale it. And there's a lot of consistency there. And arguably being consistent is one of the best things you can do. But for me, it's more about just seeing what's out there. And, there's opportunities all the time. It's just being able to see the value in them.
Yeah. And look, like sometimes people aren't comfortable with taking that risk, which is also fine but if you keep coming back to that thought platter, that's when you need to really start to consider, right, I need to take some form of action, because not everyone is built to be in property or be in business. We're all completely different, as you've alluded to. And it's important to understand that sometimes ambition doesn't actually align with skill set, personality, willingness, discipline, all these elements that are vitally important, in the same way that you and I aren't in an MBA, nothing to do with height, I'm sure.
It's time yet.
But we just don't have that specific skill set. But I would completely, and you probably agree with this, I'd completely say that I'm put on this planet to be in business and property, and I couldn't see myself doing anything else. I don't know what I'd be doing if I wasn't doing this. There's just no question as to what I'm doing. I just know it feels right, and it's fun and also stressful at the same time. And I'm sure you can probably agree to that at that point. So focusing on the intricacies of buying Heywoods, from finding out about it to getting to the point of exchange of money, exchange of contracts, what did that process look like from you, more so from a due diligence perspective?
So it was a really interesting one. Maybe I just follow stuff that's in a fire sale, because it sounds similar to an auction, but for a company. But essentially it went into administration. So that is quite a fast-paced sale of a business. And ultimately what an administrator's there is to get as much money as they can to pay off debts. And they'll do what is, best for the people who are owed money. They'll do what's best for the business that's there, if they think there's value in it. And they'll also do the best for the people that are in that business. So what did the due diligence look like? When it's in that kind of situation, time's not on your side, neither's information, because quite often, liquidators have come in, or administrators have come in, they've taken over the reins, and they're really just talking numbers and figures. They're not telling you any kind of intricacies. There's no going in, meeting the people. Fortunately, I was local anyway, so I knew the business. And you could see from, just doing anything from really simple things to just going on the website and meet the team, to seeing who's there, to then cross-laying that to the spreadsheets that you get. In all honesty, what that process looked like was, right, here are the figures. What do I think I can tweak here from what I already know to suddenly make this start stacking up? The beauty of the way I bought that business was all the debts that were associated to the business were wiped as a part of the purchase. So if you're looking at the P&Ls and 10 grand a month's going out on interest for a debt that's not been paid, then we can just take that off, and then suddenly it's starting to make sense again. One of the big caveats when you're buying a business, well, in this scenario, was to 2P over the staff, so that, it wasn't just selling the asset. It was selling the assets of the business, but with the staff security as well. It wasn't just to strip it and, bolt it onto something else that's already in existence. But it was a really unique scenario, and it was difficult because there's other people that want it. It's not very often an opportunity comes like that with a business with over 100 years of reputation in the area. It's literally a household name in that area. We have people who come in and it's 70-year-old couple, and they're like, yeah, we sold our house with you 40 years ago. Does so-and-so still work here? It's that much rooted in the community, which comes with a lot of pressure, comes with a lot of opportunity, but a lot of pressure at the same time. And the beauty for me was having that startup business. I knew what I could do, but I didn't have the biggest hurdle I had was not having an established name, because we'd only been around for 18 months at the time. So I had my own personal name that was out there, but in terms of a business, it wasn't very well known. So it was a great opportunity for me, and that was the only thing that gave me some comfort when I went into buying it, was that for a corporate entity or someone who already had a very well established business, they're going to face the challenge of, right, well, now I've got two well-established names, and amalgamating the two of those is going to be really difficult. Or a corporate, all they're really bothered about is stripping it, getting rid of everyone, sending it to a call center somewhere else, and making their margins that way. It was advertised for, I think, 2 weeks, where you got the information. Best and finals, sealed bids. I was actually, this is going to make me sound really exotic, and I'm not this exotic, but I was actually in Japan when my offer was accepted.
Oh, wow.
So I think it was like 10 o'clock at night. I got the call to say, yeah, it's gone in. But
was that like a oh crap moment?
Or
was that like, right, bring it on?
No, it was a bring it on moment.
Okay.
I'd say it was, I think we had to complete within, it was pretty much 4 weeks from the moment that the information was publicly available to the bit where I had to hand the money over.
Right, okay.
And then I had to walk through the doors on the next Monday.
Wow.
So you can imagine how that felt. Walking through as 26-year-old at the time, walking in where people have got more industry experience than I've been born.
The receptionist was like, how can we help?
Yeah. I was actually late as well, which didn't help. But so yeah, it was, that part was, I suppose, exciting, nerve-wracking, your sleepless nights, but in a good way, because it was more about the opportunity value.
Yeah.
Once the deal had been done, that was probably the stressful part, because you've literally bought something, sold as seen. It'd be like buying a car but never actually being able to open the doors or look under the bonnet. And so then it's like, right, we need to get in there quick now and just work out what the crack is. Fortunately, so I bought it in October 2022. So we're about 15 months down the line now, 16 months down the line. And the few risk elements which put it in the fire sale that was a risk element when you bought it, I'd say, well, we've got rid of them all now. So that all those cobwebs have gone, all the dark clouds that are over the business have gone. So we're in a really, really good position now. And it's been an interesting time, an interesting market. Last year wasn't known for being a great housing market, but we did well out of it. And I think when you take everything into account as to money that had to be spent because of X, Y, and Z, because of the situation of how we bought it, that now doesn't need to be spent because it's been spent and it's been sorted and it's resolved. Even down to small things like all the IT was on its last legs. And it just so happened when I took over that best part of like 7 PCs died within 2 months. So, you're talking a couple of grand to then fix those, set those back up. But it's a baptism of fire, but we've made it through to the other side and we're all good for it.
Good. What's been one of the biggest lessons that you've learned in that process?
So quite a cynical one this is, that I didn't realise how, because I've gone from a platform where we had 50 landlords managing 130 properties roughly, where I'd met them all. I knew them on first name basis. A lot of the times they trusted me. So there didn't need to be loads of going back and forth dialogue. I was a landlord myself. I kind of knew what worked and what didn't. I knew what would bring value for a landlord that a letting agent that's never been a landlord wouldn't appreciate, i.e. you want a tenant to stay in there as long as possible, because you're going to have to pay me every time to put a new tenant in. Yeah. It's coming off your bottom line every time. So I've gone from that to, 400 properties and 300 landlords, and we're selling. We last year we did on average a property transaction once every day. So we did about 365 property transactions across sales and lettings. So it was intense. And the biggest shock fact for me was how unreasonable Joe Blogs can be. Most people, and every customer facing business will have experienced this. And I met with someone the other day that was in hospitality. I was like, even you, when you've done nothing wrong, and it still surprises me what people think they feel is fair. Yeah, so that's probably been one negative learning. That, they will let you run around after them and then drop you like a hot potato and have no remorse for it whatsoever.
The good side of being a service-based business.
Yeah. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of planning into going into moving houses sometimes. It's just, right, I want it on, can you come out tomorrow and I want you to advertise it yesterday? And a week goes by, oh yeah, I've changed my mind, didn't want to do it. So there's a bit of a problem in that industry, and I still don't brand myself as an estate agent. I still feel like I'm coming into an industry with fresh ideas, i.e. I've not grown up through the corporate regime or been in that industry all my life. So we're always challenging the way things are done. No sale, no fee. I don't know when it came into the industry, but I think that's probably one of the worst things that came into the industry. Because name me another industry where you're going to do 6 months worth of work, quite literally £1,000 worth of investment in time, resource, and outlay for someone to just go, yeah, I don't fancy it anymore. And there's no payback on that. So that's that side of it learned. I suppose the biggest positive I've learned from it is, I've had to grow massively to kind of manage that. But I've also tried to stay really humble in the way I've done it. And I don't profess to know everything. I've got an amazing team of very, very experienced people. And it's about bringing all those ideas to the table, giving them all a voice and making sure that they all feel like they're heard and valued. And the biggest achievement we've done, regardless of what the P&L or the balance sheet says or reputation or whatever it might be, the biggest achievement that I've seen in that business is it's gone from being known as, these aren't my words, a revolving door of employment, i.e. people are forever coming in and out of that business, to, I know for a fact now that, we've not lost anyone in the business that we didn't really want to lose anyway within those 15 months. And that's not just me being arrogant, just saying, oh, they've left now, we didn't want them anyway. It's not been like that at all. I'd like to say that employees are a lot happier there now. Well, I know for a fact they are. And we're now got in a position where we've gone from people leaving and it's been thinking like, oh, put the fires out, put a job advert out on Indeed, to, I know we've got people in the wings that want to be a part of what we're doing. And as you've touched on earlier, where someone's cut the head off a massive corporate that was an insanely well-run business and really well established and had excellent retention, that they've got people just jumping ship left, right and centre. We've now built a business that's like a magnet for them, because like, yes, like that's how this used to be for us. There's a vision there. I feel like I'm part of something. I'm not just a cog in the machine. I don't just have to hit set KPIs. I'm a part of something bigger, and I feel a bit more valued a part of that.
Yeah, that's a beauty, that to get that type of culture, I think is, the big corporates lose it because you've got to talk to the manager that talks to the other, and above them and above them and above, and it just never filters down in the same way. Whereas obviously for you can ingrain that culture and people buy into the journey. Like, look, we're in this together and we're building this business as a whole. And I think that's credit to you as a director, and also credit to the team as well. I mean, obviously you've got some great people that do a lot of networking locally that I've met and are just so bought into the Heywoods way of life. And I think that's to get that is amazing. I think it's credit to you, it's credit to them, and to everyone be pointing in the same direction is so difficult sometimes, particularly when you get the odd individual that might unsettle the camp a little bit. But to once you've got that sort of nice culture, good people, there's no limit to what the business can achieve, really, which is credit to you, taking it from where it was to where it is now. Brilliant.
Yeah, and I think that's one of, going all the way back to the HMO development days, one of the biggest things that I've always been quite proud of is that, when you've got that business, I feel like that business is bigger than me. It's not me. At times I don't feel like it's my business. It's got all that history. It's so well established. I just feel like I'm carrying the torch for now, and I'll try and progress that business to the next stage. And then in years to come, probably decades, but someone else can take that on. And, that's how powerful that brand is. But in any project, I don't know if it's a well-coined phrase or anything, but no one's bigger than the project. So you can jump up and down, you can shout and scream, you can be as influential in the business's day-to-day runnings as you want. If you're trying to jeopardize that end goal, you're getting off the train. And that doesn't mean, like an irate getting ejection out of the business of sacking someone. But, on that HMO project, I remember we had someone working on it who was working on throughout the whole project. and someone else came in to do another part of the trade work, whatever it was. And they thought, because they didn't like them, they didn't get on with them at all. But they thought if they made such a palaver of it, that they'd be heard. I was like, the more of a scene you're making, the less you're getting heard. And the more you're trying to jeopardize the end goal, so the more you're getting pushed to one side and not getting heard at all. So that's something that, again, we're trying to bring into this business. Really interestingly, talking about culture, something that I've literally within the last few weeks feel like is my purpose within that business. I've always been very mindful that to have good people, you've got to allow progression. We're a one branch independent agency. So we've got some great people that are similar age to me. They've got big ambitions. My job is to allow them to grow. I try not get involved in the day-to-day. Naturally, you get pulled into it at times, but I see my sole duty is to keep that business growing and scaling, to give them their opportunities to grow and scale. And I recently went to a seminar where James Timpson was there.
I've come across him.
I don't know if you'll get him on your podcast, but if you do get the opportunity, then definitely take it. But he's the founder. Well, he's not the founder because it's a family business, but he's the owner of Timpson's, the cobblers and the key cutters. You'll see them in the car parks. And the presentation he did, hands down, best presentation I've ever been to. Like, I feel so fortunate I was even got to go in this small room with only 100 of us in it. And everything he does is about building the right culture. And one of the interesting things that I took away from his was he says it takes 5 years to change culture. And all he does is build cultures. So to take him 5 years, it'd probably take mere mortals 10. But yeah, the culture within his business, he's known for doing loads of things, but they've acquired like Johnson's dry cleaners, and he's implementing the culture that they'd built in Timpson's into that. I think they're 4 years in now, and he's like, we feel like we're there, but then sometimes it's a backward step and we realize we're not quite there. So again, it's about knowing what the end goal is. And, there'll be times where I feel like we're all on the same wavelength, but then there'll be times when it feels like we're all butting heads.
Yeah, I think scalability comes via culture. I think in order to scale, you need to have the right culture to encourage growth. And I think without that, you can't go from a team of, or you can't even go from a one-man band to a team of 10 without having massive issues. Without that level of culture. There's a really good book called The Culture Code. I don't know if you've read that.
No.
The first half of the book goes into detail with what one bad apple can do to a group and the effects that individual has, but also the effects of someone that is able to deal with that type of bad attitude. And it just shows you how sort of different personalities sort of collide and this, that and the other. And interestingly, they did an experiment where they had a bunch of toddlers and then a bunch of adults. And I think, don't quote me exactly, but I think they asked both of them to build a bridge or something like that. It was build a tower. So the kids, basically, they just cracked on straight away. They were all just like, trying different stuff and, doing this, that and the other. The adults actually took longer and built a worse bridge because they spent more time arguing about who was right and who was wrong rather than just cracking on.
And learning as you go.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know whether that's actually in that book. I can't remember now, but it just shows how important that is to scalability. I mean, you can scale a business, having not so good culture, depending on what that business is, but service-based businesses, I don't think you can get particularly far without having good culture, because that reflects on the client, reflects on the service that's provided, and often causes problems from your perspective and also client perspective as well.
Yeah, really interesting on that one as well. Obviously, genetically, my makeup is my mum and my dad. And as I've touched on, dad's an engineer, very analytical, instruction in the way he thinks. If it was up to him, so they've got a care agency that I don't know the numbers anymore, but they've got around 2,000 people that work for them. And if it was up to my dad, he probably would never have hired one person. He probably would have an apprentice. But then my mum is the opposite, where, she is probably the definition of jack of all trades, master of none, but just builds amazing relationships and can see the opportunity. Their MD, I think they're friends of friends, and they went for a curry and just said, yeah, I want you. And then like the next in line for an MD is someone who went to school with my mum and dad, with my sister, and he'd just rock up at the house for a house party. But over those years, she's seen the value, and it's just been about getting those people. And I probably quote my mum more than my dad, but which is a whole different story because people always assume that it's a male. That's I feel like I'm a bit of a female champion at times, but her kind of phrase has always been, you'll either work for me for 3 months or 2 months or 20 years, because you'll either be a part of that culture and value and feel like you're a part of it, or if you just come up with a stinking attitude,
you're not going to survive.
You'll be gone.
Yeah.
And I think that's comes back to, again, there's no right or wrong way of doing things. You see super successful businesses out there who are detailed entrepreneurs, leaders, whatever you want to call them, who are super detail orientated. Quite often in the tech industry, they started out as coders, or they used to fix the phones, or they're super analytical. That, when I hear someone speak like that, I find it really like demotivating for me, because I'm like, I'm not that person. I can't do that. But then you come across the likes of your James Timpsons, where he's like, the only value I bring is building the right culture and being kind to people. And I'm like, yes, that is more me. So again, that's the pros and cons of the big wide world of media and social media, is that if I just looked at that, I'd see myself as a failure and disappointment that could never achieve anything. But then you come across the odd scenario where they completely resonate with everything you do. And you're like, yeah, dead right, I can do that every day of the week.
Absolutely, yeah. And they're out there. They are out there. I mean, he's probably an example of that. He's not on social media. He's not, selling courses, stood next to a Lamborghini. Unfortunately, that's where the social media world probably fails. The people that are out there actually doing stuff, like yourself, you've obviously got Heywoods Instagram account, but it's not Alistair on the front page. You like you say, Heywoods is bigger than you. You're just a small part, well, probably a big part of Heywoods, obviously, hopefully.
I'm happy to be a small part.
But having that outlook, it's not ego driven. It's creating something meaningful in the right manner, in the right way. And I think it's so easy not to see that type of business because of, unfortunately, the world that we live in, with this quick hit Lamborghinis, easy success, making £1 million a second, selling Amazon FBA or whatever it is. But I think it's a breath of fresh air, which is why, I set up this podcast, obviously, to get people like yourself on that, don't have massive amounts of social media following it, but I know, and I've seen it firsthand, that you're doing stuff, big stuff, that most people on social media aren't doing, quite simply. And so credit to you.
Thank you.
So I think that nicely rounds us off, hopefully.
Yeah.
If people want to get in touch with you, how can they go about doing that?
Like you said, I'm not completely incognito, but obviously business profiles were quite active on Instagram. But so that's Heywoods 1881. I mean, if you ever want to speak to me direct, I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably where I'm most active, to be honest.
Cool. It's not Pigeon Courier then, no?
It's not what?
Pigeon Courier, no?
No, not Pigeon Courier or owl letters or anything like that.
Good. You're in the 21st century.
Yeah,
good.
Absolutely.
No, great stuff, Ali. Well, thank you very much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
I think hopefully there's some value in there for some people, whether it was me rambling or you rambling. It might be one
Probably
of
like
two.
a tennis match.
Good stuff. Well, thank you again for everyone that has listened today. Please obviously subscribe and like if you're on YouTube, and obviously tune in again for the next episode. I hope to see you all very soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.